The people who call you worthless are often the ones who never learned how to recognize a crown. In the kingdom of Silvermoon, nobody noticed Emily Carter when she entered a room. That was not because she was invisible. It was because people had already decided she was unimportant. Every morning before sunrise, while nobles slept beneath silk blankets and servants prepared the palace for another busy day, Emily could be found tending the moon lily garden behind the eastern wing of the royal grounds. The flowers were rare and delicate, blooming only beneath moonlight and fading when handled carelessly. Most gardeners disliked working there because the plants demanded patience. Emily loved them for the same reason. She moved quietly among the silver blossoms, trimming leaves, watering roots, and whispering gentle encouragement as if the flowers could hear her. Perhaps they could. More than once, palace servants joked that the lilies bloomed brighter when Emily was nearby. She always laughed and dismissed the idea. She was only an omega. At least that was what everyone reminded her. The nobles called her forgettable. The servants called her ordinary. Some called her unlucky because she had no known family and no noble name attached to her existence. Yet Emily never complained. She carried kindness the way others carried status. It simply belonged to her. Around her neck hung a small silver moon pendant attached to a worn chain. She had owned it for as long as she could remember. The orphanage caretaker who raised her claimed she arrived wearing it as an infant. Nobody knew where it came from. Emily wore it every day without thinking much about it. By late afternoon, excitement spread through the palace. The annual moon banquet would take place that evening. Nobles from across the kingdom were arriving to celebrate Alpha King Nathan Ashford. Servants hurried through hallways carrying decorations and trays of food. Musicians rehearsed in the grand hall. Everywhere Emily looked, people seemed eager to witness the spectacle. She intended to avoid it entirely. Grand celebrations were not meant for people like her. Unfortunately, fate had different plans. As sunset painted the sky with shades of gold and lavender, Emily carried a basket of fresh moon lily blooms toward the palace entrance. She had been instructed to deliver them directly to the banquet hall. The moment she stepped inside, she realized she had entered a world far beyond her own. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Noble families filled the room in elegant attire. Silver banners bearing the royal crest hung from towering columns. For a brief moment, Emily hesitated near the doorway. Then she lowered her gaze and continued walking. The flowers mattered more than the people. Or so she hoped. At the center of the hall stood Alpha King Nathan Ashford. Tall. Commanding. Confident. His dark royal attire and silver wolf crest immediately drew attention wherever he moved. Conversations seemed to orbit around him naturally. Emily had seen him before from a distance, but never this close. Their eyes met only for a second. Long enough for her to notice the sharp intelligence in his expression. Long enough for him to notice a simple omega carrying flowers through a room filled with nobility. Then the moment passed. Emily delivered the lilies and prepared to leave. Near the throne platform, however, Lady Isabella Crown stepped forward. Beautiful, influential, and ambitious, Isabella carried herself like someone who already considered the palace her future home. Her smile appeared pleasant. Her eyes did not. She glanced toward Emily and then toward the king. "It is remarkable," Isabella said loudly enough for nearby nobles to hear, "how some people wander into places where they clearly do not belong." Laughter followed. Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks. She lowered her eyes and turned away. Yet before she could leave, another noble asked a question. "Tell us, Your Majesty. Do you believe everyone has value?" The room grew curious. Nathan considered the question briefly. Then his gaze drifted toward Emily standing near the doorway. "Value is proven through significance," he answered calmly. "Not everyone is destined to matter." More laughter echoed through the hall. Emily froze. The words were not directed entirely at her. Yet they landed like a stone in her chest. She offered no response. No argument. No tears. She simply tightened her grip on the empty flower basket and walked quietly out of the grand hall. Behind her, the celebration continued. Nobody noticed the silver moon pendant beneath her collar glowing faintly for the first time in years. Emily did not look back as she left the grand hall. The music continued behind her. Laughter echoed through the palace corridors. The celebration moved forward as though nothing important had happened. Yet with every step she took, Nathan Ashford's words seemed to follow her. Not everyone is destined to matter. She repeated the sentence silently while crossing the moonlit courtyard. Strangely, she did not feel angry. Hurt, yes. Embarrassed, certainly. But not angry. Life had taught her long ago that disappointment often arrived wearing the face of expectation. That was why she expected so little from others. The cool evening air greeted her as she returned to the Moon Lily Garden. Silver blossoms glowed softly beneath the rising moon, their petals reflecting pale light across the pathways. The familiar sight eased some of the tension in her chest. Here, among the flowers, nobody cared about noble bloodlines or royal titles. The lilies bloomed for anyone willing to care for them. Emily set down her basket and knelt beside a cluster of young plants. As she reached toward a damaged leaf, something unusual happened. A faint silver glow appeared beneath her collar. She paused. The moon pendant resting against her chest felt warm. Not hot. Warm, like sunlight lingering on stone after a summer afternoon. Frowning, she lifted the pendant into her palm. The sapphire set at its center shimmered briefly before returning to normal. Emily stared at it for several seconds. Then she quietly laughed at herself. Perhaps she was simply tired. Across the palace, however, someone else had noticed. From the upper balcony outside his private study, Nathan Ashford looked down toward the distant gardens. He had stepped away from the banquet seeking a moment of silence. Instead, he found himself watching the solitary Omega moving among the flowers. He did not understand why his thoughts kept returning to the expression on her face when she left the hall. Most people sought his approval. Most people competed for his attention. She had done neither. She had simply walked away. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Your Majesty," said an elderly advisor entering the study. "The guests are asking for you." Nathan nodded. Yet before turning away, he glanced toward the garden one final time. For a split second, he thought he saw a silver light flash among the lilies. Then it vanished. The next morning, rumors spread throughout the palace. Some servants whispered about the king's comment during the banquet. Others repeated Lady Isabella's remarks. Emily heard fragments while carrying gardening supplies through the eastern corridor. She ignored them all. Responding would change nothing. Her focus remained on her work. Yet by midday, an unexpected visitor arrived. An elderly historian named Professor Alden Whitaker approached the garden carrying a stack of dusty books. Few people paid attention to him anymore. Most considered him eccentric. "Miss Carter," he said politely. "May I ask you a strange question?" Emily smiled. "You may ask." His eyes settled on the silver pendant around her neck. "Where did you get that necklace?" The question surprised her. "I have always had it." Professor Whitaker grew unusually serious. "Always?" Emily nodded. The historian stared at the pendant for several moments. Something resembling recognition crossed his face. Then, just as quickly, he concealed it. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." Before Emily could ask what he meant, the old man gathered his books and hurried away. She watched him disappear around the corner. For the rest of the afternoon, the encounter lingered in her thoughts. She had never seen anyone react to the necklace that way before. As evening approached, clouds drifted across the sky, partially covering the moon. Deep within the palace archives, Professor Whitaker unlocked a forgotten cabinet that had not been opened in decades. Hidden inside were records connected to the royal family and a mystery many believed had died long ago. With trembling hands, he opened the first document. His eyes widened almost immediately. Beside an ancient royal crest appeared the exact same moon-shaped symbol engraved on Emily Carter's pendant. Professor Alden Whitaker barely slept that night. The discovery hidden within the forgotten archives refused to leave his mind. For decades, historians throughout Silvermoon Kingdom had searched for clues regarding the disappearance of the royal Luna bloodline. Most believed the records had been lost forever. Others believed the entire story had become little more than legend. Yet the symbol engraved on Emily Carter's pendant matched an ancient royal seal so precisely that coincidence seemed impossible. As dawn arrived, Alden sat alone among towering shelves filled with fragile books and yellowed documents. One by one, he compared the pendant's sketch from memory against royal records. Every page led him closer to the same unsettling conclusion. Somewhere inside the palace grounds lived a young woman connected to a secret that could change the kingdom forever. Meanwhile, Emily's morning began as it always did. She carried water buckets through the moon lily garden while sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead. The flowers responded to her presence as though greeting an old friend. Their silver petals seemed brighter than usual. Several gardeners even paused to comment on it. Emily simply smiled and continued working. The strange events surrounding her pendant still lingered in her thoughts, but she refused to let curiosity distract her responsibilities. By midday, however, another unusual encounter occurred. As she trimmed damaged stems near the western pathway, a small white wolf emerged from the nearby trees. The animal appeared young and unusually calm. Instead of running away, it approached the flower beds and sat quietly watching her. Emily lowered her gardening shears. "Hello there." The wolf tilted its head. Its pale eyes remained fixed on her face. For several moments neither moved. Then the creature calmly approached and settled beside a cluster of moon lilies. Emily laughed softly. "You are either very brave or very lost." To her surprise, the wolf remained beside her for nearly an hour. Several servants passing through the garden stopped and stared. Wild wolves rarely entered palace grounds. Even stranger, they certainly did not behave this way. When Emily eventually stood to return to work, the animal rose as well and followed her a short distance before disappearing back into the trees. High above the gardens, Nathan Ashford observed the scene from a palace balcony. He had witnessed the encounter entirely by accident while reviewing kingdom reports. The sight left him strangely unsettled. Wolves were known for caution. Yet the creature had approached Emily as though it recognized her. Nathan frowned. More and more unusual events seemed to gather around the quiet Omega gardener. The thought irritated him. He preferred facts. Certainty. Clear answers. Instead, questions continued multiplying. Later that afternoon, Lady Isabella Crown arrived in the garden accompanied by two noble companions. Their elegant dresses contrasted sharply against Emily's simple work clothes. Isabella's smile appeared friendly. Her eyes did not. "The famous gardener," Isabella said lightly. "I hear even wild animals enjoy your company now." The comment drew laughter from her companions. Emily politely returned to her work. Isabella stepped closer. "Tell me, Emily. Have you ever wondered why nobody knows where you came from?" The question struck deeper than Isabella realized. Emily's hand paused over a flower stem. "Sometimes." Isabella smiled. "Perhaps there is a reason." Before Emily could respond, the noblewoman turned and walked away. Yet her words lingered long after she disappeared. That evening, Emily sat alone near the edge of the moon lily garden. The sky above glowed with soft shades of violet and silver. Absent-mindedly, she touched the moon pendant resting against her chest. Questions filled her mind. Questions about her family. Her past. Her place in the kingdom. For the first time in years, she wished she had answers. At that exact moment, deep inside the archives, Professor Whitaker opened another sealed record. A folded document slipped from between its pages and landed on the desk. The aging historian carefully unfolded it. His breath caught immediately. At the top of the parchment appeared a portrait of the last known royal Luna family. Around the neck of the infant princess depicted in the illustration hung a silver moon pendant identical to the one Emily wore every day. Professor Alden Whitaker read the document 3 times before allowing himself to believe what he was seeing. The portrait was centuries old, yet the details were unmistakable. The infant princess wore the same silver moon pendant. The royal seal matched perfectly. Even the sapphire stone at its center appeared identical. His hands trembled as he carefully laid the parchment flat across the desk. If the records were authentic, then the greatest mystery in Silvermoon Kingdom had not ended generations ago. It had survived. Somewhere within the palace walls lived a descendant of the lost royal Luna line. And every piece of evidence pointed toward Emily Carter. The realization left him stunned. For years, historians searched for forgotten heirs among noble families and distant territories. Never once had anyone considered a quiet Omega gardener. Early the next morning, Alden returned to the archives determined to continue his investigation. More records emerged from hidden cabinets and sealed boxes. Birth records. Family registries. Royal correspondence. Most were incomplete. Some had suffered damage from time. Yet the fragments formed a pattern impossible to ignore. Decades earlier, shortly after the disappearance of the royal Luna family, a confidential report described a newborn child secretly removed from danger and entrusted to unknown caretakers. The child's identifying mark was simple. A silver moon pendant carrying the crest of the Luna bloodline. Meanwhile, Emily remained completely unaware of the storm gathering around her. Her morning began in the Moon Lily Garden as usual. The flowers needed attention after a night of strong winds. As she moved between the silver blooms, she noticed something unusual. Several lilies near the center of the garden had opened fully before sunrise. That had never happened before. Moon lilies typically responded only to moonlight. Yet today their petals shimmered beneath the early morning sun. Emily knelt beside them and gently touched one of the blossoms. A faint warmth traveled through her fingertips. The sensation disappeared almost immediately. She looked around, wondering if anyone else had noticed. No one had. Across the palace grounds, Nathan Ashford prepared for another day of royal duties. Meetings with advisors filled his schedule. Trade discussions occupied the morning. Disputes among noble families demanded attention. Yet despite everything requiring his focus, his thoughts occasionally drifted toward the Omega gardener. The realization annoyed him. He barely knew her. Yet somehow she continued appearing in unexpected corners of his mind. The image of the wolf sitting peacefully beside her remained particularly difficult to forget. During a midday break, Nathan crossed the eastern courtyard and happened to pass near the gardens. He had no intention of stopping. At least that was what he told himself. Then he noticed Emily standing among the flowers. Sunlight illuminated the silver blossoms surrounding her. For a brief moment, the entire garden seemed brighter. Nathan slowed his pace without realizing it. Emily looked up and noticed him. Their eyes met. Unlike most people, she immediately returned her attention to her work instead of trying to impress him. The response felt strangely refreshing. "Your Majesty," she said politely. Nathan nodded. "The flowers appear healthy." Emily glanced around the garden. "They are stronger this season than usual." A simple conversation. Nothing more. Yet when Nathan continued toward the palace, he found himself unexpectedly curious about what she might have said if the discussion had lasted longer. Hidden beneath a nearby archway, Lady Isabella Crown watched the entire exchange. Jealousy flickered behind her composed expression. She had spent years positioning herself as the future Luna of Silvermoon Kingdom. The last thing she wanted was attention shifting toward a nameless Omega. That evening, Isabella paid a visit to the archives. Her purpose was simple. She wanted information. Unfortunately for her, she arrived just as Professor Whitaker locked away his newest discoveries. The old historian noticed her presence immediately and concealed the documents. Isabella smiled politely, but suspicion lingered in her eyes. As she departed, Alden felt a chill of concern. Whatever secret Emily carried was becoming increasingly dangerous. Back in the Moon Lily Garden, twilight settled across the kingdom. Emily sat alone beside the blooming flowers while the first stars appeared overhead. She removed the silver moon pendant and studied it beneath the fading light. For reasons she could not explain, the necklace no longer felt like an ordinary keepsake. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. And somewhere deep inside the palace archives, the final missing piece of that answer was waiting to be discovered. The answer arrived sooner than anyone expected. Early the next morning, Professor Alden Whitaker unlocked a small wooden chest hidden behind a row of ancient archive shelves. He had searched for its key for nearly 2 days. Most historians would have ignored it. The chest carried no label and appeared insignificant. Yet Alden had learned long ago that the kingdom's greatest secrets rarely announce themselves openly. With careful hands, he lifted the lid. Inside rested several royal documents wrapped in faded blue cloth. At the very bottom lay a sealed letter bearing the crest of the last royal Luna family. The elderly historian's pulse quickened. He opened the letter and began reading. Within moments, his face lost all color. The final missing piece had been found. Across the palace grounds, life continued normally. Emily spent the morning tending the Moon Lily Garden, unaware that her world was quietly changing. The flowers seemed unusually vibrant again. Several silver blossoms had opened despite the bright sunlight overhead. Visitors occasionally stopped to admire them. Some even remarked that the garden had never looked more beautiful. Emily simply smiled and thanked them. She had always believed kindness made things grow better. Around midday, an unexpected royal messenger arrived. "Miss Carter," he said respectfully. "Professor Whitaker wishes to speak with you when your duties are complete." Emily looked surprised. The request felt unusual. Did he say why? The messenger shook his head. "Only that it is important." The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Questions followed her from one flower bed to another. What could the historian possibly want? Why had he shown such interest in the pendant? And why did she feel increasingly certain that the answers were connected to her past? Meanwhile, Professor Whitaker sat alone inside a private archive chamber preparing for a conversation he never imagined having. The letter resting on his desk had been written more than 20 years earlier. According to its contents, the infant daughter of the royal Luna bloodline had survived the tragedy that destroyed her family. To protect her from those seeking power, trusted guardians had secretly hidden the child among ordinary citizens. The final instruction contained within the document was clear. The silver moon pendant would remain with the child until the day her identity could safely be revealed. Alden closed his eyes. Every clue now pointed in the same direction. Emily Carter was not merely connected to the lost royal Luna family. She was the missing heir herself. Elsewhere in the palace, Lady Isabella Crown was becoming increasingly uneasy. Too many strange events seemed connected to the gardener. Too many people were suddenly paying attention to someone who should have remained invisible. Her instincts warned her that something important was unfolding behind closed doors. Determined to uncover the truth, she began questioning servants and palace staff. Most knew nothing. A few mentioned Professor Whitaker. That alone deepened her suspicions. As evening approached, Nathan Ashford found himself once again passing through the eastern gardens. Officially, he was inspecting palace grounds. Unofficially, he was curious. Emily was kneeling beside a cluster of moon lilies when he arrived. She stood immediately and offered a respectful greeting. "Your Majesty." Nathan nodded. "The garden appears healthier every day." Emily glanced around at the silver blooms. "They seem happier lately." The response caught him off guard. Happier. Not stronger. Not larger. Happier. A small smile almost appeared before he stopped it. For a brief moment, the distance between king and gardener felt smaller than before. Then duty reclaimed his attention, and he continued on his way. After sunset, Emily finally arrived at the archives. Professor Whitaker greeted her personally and escorted her into a quiet study lined with books. His expression appeared unusually serious. Emily immediately sensed something important was about to happen. The old historian carefully placed the silver pendant sketch beside the ancient portrait he had discovered. Then he looked directly into her eyes. "Emily," he said softly. "Everything you believe about your past may be wrong." As she stared at the document spread across the desk, the pendant beneath her collar began glowing brighter than ever before. Emily stared at the documents spread across Professor Whitaker's desk as though they belonged to someone else. The portrait. The royal crest. The sealed letter. Every piece pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Yet her mind struggled to accept it. "There must be a mistake," she whispered. The elderly historian's expression softened. "I hoped there was." He carefully placed the final letter beside the portrait. "I checked every record 3 times." The room fell silent. Emily lowered her gaze toward the infant depicted in the painting. The child wore the same silver moon pendant she carried every day. The same sapphire stone. The same crescent moon design. Her fingers tightened around the necklace resting against her chest. Suddenly, memories she had never questioned felt different. The orphanage caretaker refusing to discuss where she came from. The pendant she had always been told to protect. The strange sense that something was missing whenever she thought about her past. "If this is true," Emily asked quietly, "why was I never told?" Professor Whitaker glanced toward the sealed letter. "Because whoever protected you believed secrecy was the only way to keep you safe." The words lingered heavily between them. Safe from what? Safe from whom? Emily wanted answers, yet every answer seemed to create more questions. As the evening deepened outside the archive windows, Professor Whitaker explained everything he had uncovered. The royal Luna bloodline had not disappeared entirely. A single infant survived. Trusted guardians removed the child from public view and concealed her identity. The moon pendant served as the final proof of her heritage until the proper time arrived. Every surviving document now pointed toward that child becoming Emily Carter. Across the palace, Nathan Ashford sat alone in his private study reviewing kingdom reports. Yet concentration proved impossible. His thoughts drifted repeatedly toward the gardener. The realization frustrated him. He had spent years training himself to focus on duty above all else. Emotions complicated decisions. Attachments clouded judgment. Yet lately, Emily seemed impossible to ignore. There was something unusual about her presence. Not because she demanded attention. Because she never did. A sudden knock interrupted his thoughts. An advisor entered carrying an urgent message. "Your Majesty," the man said. "Professor Whitaker requests a private audience tomorrow morning. He claims it concerns a matter of royal importance." Nathan frowned immediately. The historian rarely made such requests. Did he explain further? "No, Your Majesty." Nathan dismissed the advisor but remained thoughtful long after the door closed. Something significant was happening inside the palace. He could feel it. Meanwhile, Lady Isabella Crown had reached the same conclusion. Her network of informants had already reported unusual activity surrounding the archives. More troubling still, Professor Whitaker appeared increasingly protective of Emily Carter. Isabella's instincts warned her that the gardener represented a growing threat. She simply did not know why. Back inside the archive chamber, Emily finally rose from her chair and approached the window. Moonlight stretched across the palace grounds beyond. Everything looked exactly as it had the day before. Yet nothing felt the same. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Professor Whitaker joined her near the window. "That depends on you." Emily looked surprised. "Me? You are the one whose life will change." The historian smiled gently. "Not the records. Not the crown. You." For several moments neither spoke. Then Emily surprised herself with her response. "I do not want a crown." Whitaker laughed quietly. That may be the strongest evidence of all. His answer earned a small smile from her. Despite everything, she remained the same person who cared for flowers and spoke kindly to strangers. Royal blood had not changed her heart. The realization comforted her more than she expected. As midnight approached, Emily prepared to leave. Before she reached the door, however, the pendant suddenly pulsed with silver light. Brighter than ever before. Both she and the historian froze. The glow lasted only a few seconds. Then it faded. Neither understood what had triggered it. Yet Professor Whitaker recognized one detail immediately. The ancient records described the pendant responding whenever the true heir stood on the threshold of discovery. And for the first time in more than 20 years, the lost royal Luna was beginning to learn who she truly was. The following morning, Silvermoon Palace awakened beneath a sky of pale silver clouds. To everyone else, it appeared like any ordinary day. Servants moved through corridors carrying linens and breakfast trays. Guards rotated positions along the outer walls. Noble visitors discussed politics over morning tea. Yet beneath the routine calm, invisible currents of change were moving through the kingdom. Professor Alden Whitaker arrived outside the Royal Council chamber carrying a leather portfolio pressed tightly against his chest. Inside were copies of every document he had uncovered. The portrait. The letters. The lineage records. Decades of forgotten history rested in his hands. He understood the weight of what he was about to reveal. Once spoken aloud, the truth could never be hidden again. Inside the chamber, Nathan Ashford sat at the head of a long table reviewing reports from neighboring territories. Advisors filled the surrounding seats. Discussions regarding trade agreements and harvest forecasts occupied the morning agenda. Yet the moment Professor Whitaker entered, the atmosphere shifted. The elderly historian rarely interrupted official council meetings. Nathan immediately recognized the seriousness in his expression. "Professor," Nathan said. "You requested an audience." Alden nodded. "Your Majesty. What I am about to present concerns the future of the kingdom." Silence settled across the room. One by one, the advisors turned their attention toward the historian. Carefully, Alden opened the portfolio and placed several documents on the table. Nathan examined the first page. Then the second. His expression gradually changed from curiosity to disbelief. By the time he reached the final letter, the room had become completely silent. "These records have been verified," Alden explained. "Every surviving source confirms the same conclusion." Nathan slowly lowered the documents. "You are telling me the lost royal Luna survived?" "Yes, Your Majesty. And she is living inside this palace." Alden nodded once more. "She has been here all along." Across the table, several advisors exchanged stunned glances. Some struggled to comprehend the implications. Others immediately understood. The lost royal Luna bloodline represented more than history. It represented legitimacy. Destiny. A forgotten piece of the kingdom itself. Nathan's gaze settled on the portrait of the infant princess. Around the child's neck hung the familiar silver pendant. Suddenly, memories returned with uncomfortable clarity. Emily standing quietly in the banquet hall. Emily tending flowers beneath the morning sun. Emily lowering her eyes while nobles laughed. Emily hearing him say that not everyone was destined to matter. A heavy silence filled his chest. For the first time, Nathan found himself wishing he could take those words back. Meanwhile, Emily spent the morning exactly as she always had. She watered flowers. Trimmed damaged stems. Replanted seedlings weakened by recent weather. The simplicity of the work brought comfort. Yet despite her efforts to focus, Professor Whitaker's revelations remained impossible to ignore. Royal Luna. Lost heir. Hidden bloodline. The words felt disconnected from reality. She still felt like the same girl who had grown up without answers. The same Omega who preferred flowers to attention. The same woman who never wanted power. As she knelt beside a row of moon lilies, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. You seem distracted today. Emily looked up. Nathan Ashford stood nearby. She immediately rose to her feet. Your Majesty. Nathan nodded, though his usual confidence seemed strangely subdued. For several moments neither spoke. Then his gaze drifted toward the silver pendant resting against her collar. You have worn that necklace for a long time. Emily touched it instinctively. As long as I can remember. Nathan looked away briefly. Something troubled him. She could see it. Yet she could not understand why. It suits you, he said quietly. The compliment surprised both of them. Emily offered a small smile. Thank you. A simple exchange. Yet after Nathan departed, neither forgot it. Elsewhere in the palace, Lady Isabella Crown received news that sent alarm through her entire household. One of her informants had discovered fragments of the historian's investigation. Not enough to reveal everything. Enough to reveal danger. Enough to suggest that Emily Carter was connected to something far greater than anyone imagined. As twilight approached, whispers began spreading among the highest levels of palace society. A secret long buried beneath history was rising toward the surface. And for Nathan Ashford, the growing realization became impossible to escape. The woman he once dismissed as insignificant might be the most important person in the kingdom. The whispers could no longer be contained. What began as quiet conversations inside archive rooms and private studies spread through Silvermoon Palace like wind moving through autumn leaves. Advisors spoke carefully behind closed doors. Noble families exchanged rumors during evening gatherings. Servants carried fragments of information from corridor to corridor. Nobody possessed the complete truth, yet everyone sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. At the center of every rumor stood the same unlikely name. Emily Carter. The Omega Gardener. The girl most people had spent years overlooking. Inside the Royal Council chambers, preparations were quietly underway for an official review of the evidence Professor Whitaker had uncovered. The process could not be rushed. The discovery was too important. Every document required verification. Every record demanded examination. Yet with each passing day, the conclusion became increasingly difficult to deny. The lost royal Luna bloodline had not vanished. It had survived. Meanwhile, Emily continued performing her daily duties despite the growing attention surrounding her. She preferred the company of flowers to the uncertainty spreading through the palace. The Moon Lily Garden remained the one place where life still felt simple. There, titles did not matter. Expectations did not matter. Yet even the garden seemed different now. Visitors arrived more frequently. Curious glances followed her movements. Conversations stopped when she approached. People who once ignored her now treated her with unusual politeness. Emily found the change uncomfortable. One afternoon, while tending a row of lilies beneath a bright blue sky, she noticed several young palace servants watching her from a distance. Their expressions carried admiration rather than judgment. The realization felt strange. She had not changed. Yet somehow everyone else had. Across the palace, Nathan Ashford found himself facing a different struggle. Every new piece of evidence strengthened the truth he could no longer avoid. The woman he had dismissed as insignificant was likely the rightful heir to one of the most important bloodlines in kingdom history. More troubling than the revelation itself was what it forced him to remember. He remembered the banquet. He remembered the laughter. Most of all, he remembered his own words. Not everyone is destined to matter. The sentence haunted him now. Nathan had spoken from certainty. From assumption. From the belief that status revealed value. Yet Emily had quietly disproved every assumption he held. Her kindness required no title. Her dignity required no crown. Even before anyone suspected her heritage, she possessed qualities many nobles lacked. The realization brought a rare feeling to the Alpha King. Regret. Late that afternoon, he visited the Moon Lily Garden once more. Emily stood near the center of the blossoms, sunlight reflecting softly from the silver pendant resting against her chest. For a moment, Nathan simply observed her. Not as a king examining a subject. Not as a ruler assessing importance. Simply as a man seeing another person more clearly than before. Emily eventually noticed him approaching. "Your Majesty." Nathan offered a respectful nod. This time, there was a sincerity in his expression she had never seen before. "I hope the garden is treating you well." A small smile touched her face. "It always does." They walked slowly among the flower beds for several minutes. The conversation remained simple. Flowers. Weather. Palace life. Yet beneath every ordinary word lingered unspoken truths neither was ready to discuss. For the first time, Nathan found himself appreciating how peaceful her presence felt. There was no ambition in her. No manipulation. No desire for advantage. Only quiet honesty. Elsewhere, Lady Isabella Crown watched events unfold with growing frustration. The attention surrounding Emily had become impossible to ignore. Worse still, Nathan himself seemed increasingly interested in the gardener. Isabella understood palace politics well enough to recognize a shifting tide. Something larger than ambition was moving through Silvermoon Kingdom. As evening arrived, a royal announcement spread through the palace. A formal gathering would take place in the Grand Hall 3 days later. Nobles, advisors, and honored guests were required to attend. Officially, the purpose remained undisclosed. Unofficially, speculation exploded throughout the kingdom. And as moonlight settled over the palace that night, Emily stood alone in the moon lily garden holding the silver pendant in her hands. Somewhere ahead waited answers she had never sought. Somewhere ahead waited a truth powerful enough to change her life forever. And for the first time, the entire kingdom was beginning to wait for that truth alongside her. 3 days later, the Grand Hall of Silvermoon Palace stood filled beyond capacity. Nobles occupied every balcony. Advisors lined the walls. Representatives from influential families filled the central floor. The atmosphere carried a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone sensed history was about to unfold. Yet few understood how deeply the truth would reshape the kingdom. At the front of the hall stood Alpha King Nathan Ashford beside the royal council. His expression remained calm, but those who knew him well recognized the weight behind his composure. Nearby, Professor Alden Whitaker held the collection of documents that had changed everything. Emily stood quietly near the entrance, wearing the same simple attire she had always worn. She felt completely out of place among the grandeur surrounding her. Yet despite the attention focused upon her, she remained the same person who cared for flowers and greeted strangers with kindness. When the gathering finally began, silence spread through the hall. Professor Whitaker stepped forward and presented the evidence. One document after another. The ancient portrait. The lineage records. The sealed letter. The royal crest. Every piece connected to the same conclusion. Murmurs swept through the crowd as realization slowly settled over the audience. The lost royal Luna bloodline had survived. Not in a distant territory. Not among powerful nobles. Within the palace itself. The revelation transformed the room. Shock appeared on countless faces. Some nobles stared in disbelief. Others exchanged stunned glances. High above, servants who once passed Emily without notice struggled to comprehend what they were hearing. Through it all, Emily stood silently. The attention felt overwhelming. Yet she knew the truth now. Running from it would change nothing. Finally, Professor Whitaker spoke the words everyone had been waiting to hear. The rightful heir of the lost royal Luna lineage is Emily Carter. Silence followed. Complete and absolute. For a moment, nobody seemed able to breathe. Then the hall erupted with astonishment. Across the room, Lady Isabella Crown looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Years of ambition suddenly felt meaningless. The future she imagined for herself vanished in a single moment. Yet the greatest change occurred within Nathan Ashford. Standing before the assembled kingdom, he looked at Emily and saw her clearly for the first time. Not as a gardener. Not as an Omega. Not as someone society overlooked. He saw the woman who had shown kindness when no one rewarded it. The woman who carried dignity without demanding recognition. The woman whose value existed long before anyone discovered her heritage. Slowly, Nathan stepped forward. The crowd immediately fell silent once more. Every eye followed his movement. Emily looked at him uncertainly. Nathan stopped several feet away and lowered his head respectfully. The gesture stunned the entire hall. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. "I once judged your worth by what I believed I could see. I was wrong." The honesty in his words silenced every whisper. Your value never came from a title. It never came from bloodlines or royal records. It was always yours. Emotion flickered across Emily's face. Nathan continued. "The kingdom has rediscovered its royal Luna today. But long before that discovery, you were already someone worthy of respect. No grand speech could have meant more. Because those words came not from obligation, but from understanding." Around them, the kingdom witnessed something far greater than a royal revelation. They witnessed humility. Growth. Truth. Later that evening, after the celebrations ended and the crowds departed, Emily returned to the Moon Lily Garden. The flowers glowed softly beneath the full moon. Everything felt strangely peaceful. Footsteps approached behind her. Nathan joined her among the silver blossoms. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable. At last, Emily smiled gently. "I still do not want a crown." Nathan laughed quietly. "That may be why you deserve one." Together they looked across the moonlit garden where her story had quietly begun. The kingdom now knew her name. The truth had finally emerged. Yet the most important thing remained unchanged. Emily Carter was still the woman who chose kindness when no one was watching. And beneath the silver glow of the moon lilies, the lost royal Luna finally came home.